Blake 7 is the work of Terry Nation, famous for creating the Daleks of Doctor Who. In fact, as another BBC science fiction program, there are a lot of familiar faces over the years of this show, including an appearance by a future Doctor, no less. Blake 7 originated in an unexpected place, Terry Nation's ass. In the midst of pitching a bunch of shows that could be produced with American networks, Nation's ideas were all being rejected. So in a fourth quarter rally, he pulled Blake 7 out of thin air, which sounded intriguing enough to at least get started. Nation crafted the scripts for the first episode and the second, Spacefall. Not Skyfall, because that would be a stupid name, wouldn't it? The scripts were enough to convince the BBC to go ahead with developing a series. David Maloney, former Doctor Who producer, was brought on board to produce, with Chris Boucher, who wrote The Face of Evil for Doctor Who, which I previously reviewed. He would be script editor on the series. Terry Nation declared, and he admitted later this was because of ego, that he would write all 13 episodes of the first series. He had hoped to achieve a role akin to that which Gene Roddenberry had on Star Trek, a writer-producer. So taking on all the scripts seemed like a good first step in establishing that this was his vision. He quickly realized he'd made a horrible, horrible mistake. Facing such a massive workload, Nation found himself turning in first drafts rather than completed scripts. So while he was credited with every episode, Boucher was giving each an uncredited rewrite. The stories and characters were all Nation, but Boucher was giving them their life. In particular, Avon, who was originally meant to be a sidekick of a sidekick. He's not even in this episode. But he would later emerge as one of the most popular characters in the series. I think it's a safe bet that if it were not for him fleshing out the characters, the series probably would not have become anywhere near as popular as it did. It might not have even survived the first series. Rather than introduce you to the world of Blake 7, let's just jump right into it and you can see it for yourself. It starts with a close-up of a security camera, either to establish a point about this civilization we're seeing, or else our camera has fallen in love. Yeah, you're a dirty, dirty girl, aren't you? We soon meet a man identified only as Raj, who's meeting with River and thoroughly annoyed that, per her instructions, he's gone without food and drink for 36 hours. But I'm sure with this new diet, he's going to keep the weight off this time. They meet with a third guy who leads them to the exit, a concern because going outside is forbidden. The entire human race has been grounded. That's why Blake had to go to bed with no dinner for 36 hours. All the while the trio is being followed. Someone is obviously spying on them, which I found curious, so I went to the #1 source for all my covert activities, WikiHow. WikiHow, making your stalking easier than ever. But they make note of one of the essentials. Always look as inconspicuous as possible, something obvious to even the most novice spies, which is why this one is stumbling after them with a limp, because nothing blends in quite like a man half stumbling his way alone up a hallway. He must work for the administration. They're the reason for this fast. They drug the food and water to keep people tranquil. After a day and a half or so it wears off, so Raj can approach this with a clear head. Except all he is confused. He was supposed to meet a man with news about his family. Now suddenly he's surrounded by people it's illegal to be with, being told that if he tries to report any of this, he's going to be framed, so he'll go down too. And then a man he's never met before in his life walks up and says, "Nice to meet you, my old friend." If that's life without drugs, just imagine what it's like with them. You probably spend half the day holding a conversation with a door. The news about his family is bad. They're dead, brother and sister, executed after Raj's trial, which is really confusing because he doesn't remember ever being on trial. His full name is Raj Blake, and he used to lead dissidents against the Federation. Yeah, I'm not sure if that was meant as a compliment or insult of Star Trek, but the Federation here is also centered on Earth, except it's a totalitarian police state. Insert your own joke here. Blake was betrayed, captured, had brain diddling done, and not only confessed, but urged others to stop this misguided revolt. They kept him alive because a broken Blake was more useful to them than a martyr. If all this is weird, well, guess what? That guy who was tailing them earlier, Tiny Tim, he shows up and joins in the meeting that they're all having. So I don't know. Maybe he was just too embarrassed to ask for directions after getting lost. "Don't worry, for I know the path to victory. I know where to lead you. I know how we will overcome." Now, has anyone seen my keys? But things take a turn for the worse. The cops show up, and not nice-looking cops.
We must not resort to violence. We claim our rights as citizens and demand to be treated as civil prisoners.
Damn it, it worked for Gandhi. While Blake helplessly listens in from nearby, the entire group is slaughtered and their bodies left where they fall. Well, tragic. At least I've managed to give them the Oh, bloody hell. But now he's starting to remember. Remember undergoing treatments, remember being beaten by cops, remember running while flailing his arms because he hasn't really gotten the cardio he should have. Some of it starts to come back, despite the efforts of the psychologist to convince him that none of this is real.
Must rest.
No drugs.
All right. No drugs. Now try not to think anymore.
I'll put on some X Factor for you to watch. That should help. The doctor speaks with some of the head honchos and admits that with enough of a breakdown, Blake could access all the memories they buried. He thinks it's simpler to just kill him. You know, he's a doctor and all that, so naturally that's the first thing that comes to mind. They say no, he'd just be a rallying point for the dissidents if he died, so the only choice is to smear him so badly that nobody would want anything to do with someone so heinous. Perhaps we could tell the world he's responsible for the Ninja Turtles movie. No, we don't want to go that far. Let's just say he's a child molester. For a complete show of fairness, Blake's lawyer is told by the evil overlords to do all that he can to see that Blake gets justice. And I'm sure he'll do his best, if only to finally get the jurisprudence merit badge for his Boy Scout troop. Blake wants the chance to be able to make a statement in open court, and he is prepared to plead guilty to anything. Anything at all. Whatever it takes, so long as... What? Well, maybe a statement's not really as important as it sounds. There are more important things in life, like not publicly confessing to molesting children. That's pretty high on all our lists, I think we'll agree. But the children are absolutely certain this happened, thanks to the work of that doctor who used some total recall technology to manufacture memories of the experience. And while I'm not a medical ethics expert, I think planting vivid memories of sexual assault is not something recommended by your pediatrics class. It doesn't sound like first do no harm to me. It also shows the depravity of the government. They know the violation of children is heinous. That's why they picked that charge after all. To do so, though, they forced the kids to experience that violation and through having their minds violated in the process. George Orwell would slow clap and shake his head at the very sight of this. So the trial begins.
Is the accused satisfied that his defence has been fully and fairly prepared?
The charges against me are totally false. I am not guilty, therefore I offer no defence.
That's an interesting way to look at it, Blake. Never heard anyone using passive aggressiveness as a legal strategy before. Or what's next? Irony? Oh yes, I'm so guilty. The way trials are handled in the future is that, rather than standing about all day trying to sound like Johnny Cochran, the two sides present their cases in the form of plastic spheres, which are analyzed by a computer that weighs the evidence and determines a verdict. Well, with no defense, Blake is found incredibly guilty, and he is sentenced to life on the Cygnus Alpha penal colony. Now remember Limpy, the Wonder Agent? He was indeed a spy working for the administration, and he was concerned that with Blake alive, he could identify him. That's why dealing with him was so important. We couldn't risk any chance of him finding out that he was actually working for the government. Well, as you can imagine, if you don't want Blake to know he's alive, he should stay far, far away from him. Like a good 5 or 6 feet at least, right? Because he stumbles his way right into the courtroom for seemingly no other reason than to reveal he was a traitor to Blake. Usually the villain has the decency to gloat when they do something so brazenly defying common sense. Blake awakens as a thief. Villa is doing what you'd expect, stealing Blake's stuff while they're in holding. Jenna joins in their conversation. She used to be a smuggler before winding up in here. They assure him that there is no hope. Thank you for that. But Blake's lawyer is convinced that there's something more going on, but it will require checking the records. No doubt secret and kept under the gaze of ever-vigilant guards at all times. We'll have to find some way to outfox him.
I'm Telvaran with the Justice Department. I want to run a check on the medical records of those children.
It'll have to wait until morning.
We are up against a chess master here. But somehow the lawyer manages to overcome this worthy adversary and look at the records. They do match the official record, but he notes that all 3 missed school on the same day. And after a little bribery, they got access to hospital admissions, revealing 3 unidentified patients treated and sent home that day. That plus 007, licensed to shambles, showing up at the trial, is enough to raise reasonable doubt and demand that Blake remain on Earth and a full inquiry take place. Except the boss man lets slip info that he's not supposed to know, and when they overhear him talking to the doctor about making himself scarce for a while, they know they're on their own with this. So he and the missus trick the doctor into giving them the evidence, slip out of the city to explore the tunnels, and find the bodies, because cleaning up after your mass murder sounds like work. And if I wanted an honest living, I wouldn't have gone into the mass murder business, would I? All of this, though, is likely intentional. Somebody probably said, no one is supposed to come out here anyway, so if anyone does stumble across the bodies, we'll just add them to the pile. It doesn't matter. The leadership of the Federation has become so accustomed to their absolute rule, with so many ways to cover things up after all, they've just stopped being cautious. And as a result, their craftiness is severely limited. They tend towards blunt instruments rather than subtlety. That's a weakness that can be exploited by Blake and those like him, those who oppose them. Plus, those within who have cunning. They can use that against their political adversaries. Meanwhile, Blake's getting rather anxious that he's being loaded onto a ship for Cygnus Alpha when he was promised he'd get to avoid that whole being sent to a planet full of brutal convicts who think that he sexually assaulted children situation. Luckily, with that evidence and the big old pile of corpses backing up his story, Blake won't be going anywhere. Not unless they were somehow murdered by a brutal fascist regime bent on covering up their tracks at all costs. Well, what are the odds of that?
I think a transporter accident. Killed instantly.
Oh, this is not your day, Blake. So with that, the ship is underway. Blake is in confinement. All in all, things are bleak.
Take a long look. That's the last you'll ever see of it.
No, I'm coming back.
I've got you right where I want you. The first 3 episodes together are the foundation for the series, so I'm going to lead off discussing this episode further until next week. Yep, Tuesday is Spacefall, and Thursday, Cygnus Alpha. Ooh, that title doesn't sound promising, Blake.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
Take it easy. I hate personal violence, especially when I'm a person.